Real Talk with Jodi and Michal. Real friends, real situations, real life. Authentic chats from the heart to the gut. Two best friends keeping it raw, real, and relatable.
Well, hello, everybody. And hello, my friend Jodi. Welcome to Real Talk with Jodi and Michal. And this is our weekly in-depth chat about things that are interesting our brains. This is my very old friend and dear colleague, Jodi Greenblatt from Jodi Greenblatt Coaching. And I'm Michal Offer, and we are here to talk about life, right? Life, what it's like to live, and things that are interesting and real, like a real perspective. There's no airs and fake things here. So with that being said, Jodi, it's good to see you this week. How are you doing?
Good to see you too, Michal. I'm loving this. Good to see you more often lately.
Right. It's probably the most we've seen each other in years, because although we used to speak on the phone a lot,
Yeah.
never really did the Zoom thing or
yeah,
the video
face to
thing.
face.
So it's great. And I have to tell everybody, and I know we'll post a picture at some point, but Jodi looks exactly the same. Jodi has looked exactly the same, like exactly. I'm not even kidding. Her hair, everything. She's looked exactly the same from, well, I don't remember her when we were 3, but from the time that we were in high school together. And you have some pictures of that. I think you sent them to me of us like high school and in our like late teens or early 20s. And yeah, she looks exactly the same. It's
I
like
love that.
I'll
never tire of hearing that. I saw again on Zoom, someone that we know from high school who contacted me after like 30 years or something, and we connected on Zoom, and he said the same thing. Said I changed, and I'm like, I love it. That's all good. I'm happy to hear it.
You know what? When you're in your 50s, that's the best thing. That's the best thing to hear. I would recognize you in a heartbeat. Some people, though, I have to say, this is a little, but you see, we see pictures of people from high school, and you're like, who's that?
Yeah.
And then you hear who it is, and it's like, oh, ooh,
Or even if it's not like that, like a bad thing, it's just they look different. Or sometimes I wonder if we just don't remember, how people
look. There's some people I have no recollection of at all, but some people, and it's not that they aged badly or well. It's just like I wouldn't be able to pull them out of a crowd if you paid me money. Right.
Yeah.
But anyway,
my hair being the same probably also helps.
It helps, right? But everything, it's just the same, which is wonderful, because it's like speaking to my old friend, but crazy because, oh my goodness, we should all have your genes. But I have to say that you've shown me pictures of your brother, and from a face perspective, he's exactly the same too. I would be
really.
Yeah.
Interesting.
He's aged though. I can see he looks like an older version of his small self, but you don't. You look exactly the same.
Oh, thank you.
It's wonderful. Anyway, on to our topic for today, because as much as I'd like to talk about high school, I'm sure all our listeners aren't really that interested in what we did many, many years ago, or maybe they are. But
I was going to say there's some stories that, depending on
I'm sure.
How it comes up, would be kind of fun.
But I think I'd rather get on, because we have such a good topic today that I think we touched on a little bit last week, which is and I used the word before we started recording, toxicity. But what is a toxic relationship? And we kind of touched on that a bit last week. We started to test the waters there, and this is so much of the work that you do specifically in your Empower Her program, and in a way it's a lot of the work that I do, because there's a lot of emotion, I guess, for lack of a better term, around food and food choices and self-medication with food and good and bad and right and wrong. And there's this morality around there. And I think there's a definite link between the two. And I always say how we are in one area of our life tends to be how we are in every area of our life. And having a toxic relationship with a human and having a toxic relationship with ourselves, which is something you talk about, and how we treat ourselves, which is what I do because it's how you nourish your body, I think is very interrelated. So with that whole long diatribe, I'm going to throw it over to you. And I'm going to say, when you're discussing it with women specifically, but possibly with men too, or with couples. I know that you've been a relationship and a marriage and a couples therapist for like decades now, so much experience. So everyone who's listening, take note, because you have a smart one here. So how would you begin to define a toxic relationship?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a nuanced answer, because the difference between toxic and what we might say is people will just say not a good relationship or a dysfunctional or an unhealthy relationship. The difference can be nuanced. It sometimes has to do with like the behaviors or the words that a person is using. Depends on the context, depends on the intention. If the person is intending to be manipulative, an example might be I often preface this, I will be speaking in terms of women in the toxic relationship just because I work with women, so I'm just going to keep using that. But of course, it can happen the other way around, or both people can have toxic traits or patterns. So let's say, for instance, a woman's partner says something to them about the way that they look, or points out something about another woman. If it's a healthy relationship and they simply are just making a comment, nothing wrong with it. But toxic, if there is an underhanded gaslighting attached, manipulation attached, intention to make the woman doubt herself, wonder if he's looking at other women, there's a little undertone of trying to compare or criticize her, those things start to become toxic. And did you have a question? Go ahead.
I just had a question about what you were saying, a comment and a question. So what I'm hearing is, if the intention or if the feeling that comes out of the comment is making the person receiving the comment feel less than, then that could be an indication of toxicity. Yeah.
Yes. And I like the way you said could be.
Right.
Because, I mean, really, if we really get deep into this, the person receiving it also has to check in with themselves. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes. Yeah. So my other question, and I just want to clear it up, because I think it's become a very overused and a very misused term. I would like you, as a therapist, to define the term gaslighting.
And let me first say also, I was going to say gaslighting is always toxic. So that's one of those things that is always toxic.
Right.
And a toxic relationship is always dysfunctional. A dysfunctional relationship doesn't have to necessarily be toxic.
Got it.
Gaslighting in general, I would say, is when, if we go for definition, but then I would like to describe it further, is when something is done or said in a way that is intended to make the recipient doubt their reality. If I can just put it like a simple comment like that.
Yeah.
I think some indications that you're being gaslit are confusion. When someone is doing something or saying something that causes you to not be sure of the situation, not be sure of yourself, not be sure of what's going on, And sometimes women literally describe feeling confused in their brain, because gaslighting goes against what you think is true. But you are hearing something else that is contradictory, seeing something else that is contrary to what you know to be true in the world. And it doesn't make sense in your brain. And that's where the confusion comes from.
Okay. So how, in a real life example, how would somebody use the gaslighting technique? I guess it's not like, oh, gee, I'm going to gaslight you. But how would somebody use that technique, like in a relationship? Like if you and I were having a conversation and I was gaslighting you, what would that look like?
Yeah, I'll use a very common one that I get.
Yeah.
And that is with cheating. A guy's cheating on a woman. She finds out with evidence that feels 100% certain to her. She literally saw it with her eyes, literally saw something in a text, and he says, it's not what you think. Or he says, or he comes up with another story to explain what you're looking at. And he says it in such a way that it seems true, seems possible, or simply because you trust the man, or there's another side of him that there are lots of positives about him. So again, it's the doesn't make sense in your head thing. So it doesn't make sense in your head that what he's saying would be a complete manipulation or lie. But what you're seeing is what you saw. That's a very common example.
And I think both of us are quite aware of situations where that has happened, be that knowing people or within our own lives, right? So that I can understand. So it's outright manipulation for all intents and the attempt to manipulate the situation to your benefit.
That's right, to your benefit, to hide something. Yeah.
Well, hide something would be your benefit, right?
Right, exactly. And it makes me think about and I'm going way ahead into other things now, but it makes me think about how a person's reality can get, or your perception can get altered way early on by something as simple as you little, and we may not even have the words to explain that you feel angry or happy or sad, but you just know what you feel. You know a lot more than what you can say when you're little. And you feel a certain way, but something in your household, so, you are brought up in a certain way to be predisposed to falling for gaslighting and toxic relationships and getting back into those kinds of dynamics. So when you're little, you might be experiencing something, but in your home, whatever's going on isn't matching it. So let's say you're feeling sad about something, but the rest of your family is happy. It's like not making sense to you, or you're being told not to feel a certain way because you don't have to feel that way in this situation, but yet you are feeling that way. And that might not be a deliberate attempt to gaslight, but your reality is being questioned and you aren't trusting yourself. So gaslighting can also, I think a person can be more susceptible to gaslighting if you aren't trusting yourself. I think that's a factor as well.
And I think the trust in ourselves from my work, it rarely happens when we're an adult. It very often begins in our childhood, in the formation of how we view us showing up in the world.
Yeah, our self-concept.
Yeah, which is all right. So reeling it back into
let's just be like real serious.
So I just wanted to clear that up. I think because people use gaslighting all the time now, and I'm not sure that it's always used. And actually, now I am sure that it is not always used with its true intent. Same as toxic relationship, as you discussed. A toxic relationship is dysfunctional, but a dysfunctional relationship isn't always toxic.
Yeah. The words toxic, gaslighting, and narcissist are often overused today.
That's another one. Narcissism, we'll get into another time, though.
Yeah. I know. I just wanted to mention because it's one of those big ones that also is overused.
Oh gosh, yes.
Used correctly. And gaslighting isn't just lying. I want to say that as well. It's not just lying. Yes, it entails lying or lying by omission sometimes, but gaslighting is not the same as lying. And I think that's sometimes where it gets overused. Someone's lying and a person says, oh, you're gaslighting.
Right. And I mean, we lie for many reasons. We gaslight for our own benefit. We often lie telling ourselves, or not like we people, that it's for the other person's benefit. But gaslighting is for our benefit and our benefit only. Right. There's no benefit in telling your wife you're not cheating when she's she's cheating. Anyway, so back to a toxic relationship. So I understand the nuance, but what are some of the symptoms that I would like if I came to you and I said, you know, Jodi, I'm in this relationship. This is some stuff going on. I don't know if it's dysfunctional. I don't know if it's toxic. I mean, are both of them, you know, the same result that I need to leave? Is a dysfunctional relationship more work honorable if the other person is willing? But how would I be like, how does a toxic relationship show up in me when I come to see you?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, that confusion thing, I use that as it's not a clinical measure, but I find it a very useful measure. But being in a toxic relationship is, first of all, it develops slowly. It's insidious. You don't see it developing, and then it's there. And by the time you realize you're in a toxic relationship, your well-being has been impacted. And so that's what I would be seeing. It can be physical health, mental well-being, emotional well-being is being impacted. More importantly, though, I think if there's abuse, I mean, that's a whole, for sure. I mean, I don't want to get too deep. I'll say if there's abuse, of course, because if you talk about, should I leave? If there's abuse, yes. But it's
May also... I say something? Sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to talk over you. But one of the things that I would say there's a lot of confusion around is physical abuse is obvious.
Yes.
Emotional abuse.
Gaslighting is emotional abuse.
But those are not as obvious. And I think if I came to you and I mean, I said my partner is physically assaulting me, you would say, get out. Get out now. It's not going to get better. Once they do it once, chances are they're going to do it again. You're done. That's a lot more black and white, I think, than my partner said this to me.
Right. And that's the nuance that I started out saying. So it's going to be, the goal is not to determine, yes, ultimately you will figure it out, but the goal is not to say, is it toxic or is it dysfunctional? You need to understand the dynamics that are happening. Make requests for the person to stop doing what they're doing. And if they're not making any changes, well, then you want to evaluate whether you want to leave regardless, whether it's toxic or dysfunctional. And I break that down I said that in like 10 seconds. But this happens over time to kind of figure out what is going on, what is the dynamics in the conflict, because there's going to happen conflict, of course. What are the dynamics? Having communication with the person, asking them to stop doing what they're doing. Sometimes people are able to make changes. So it depends on the person's, so we'll say the man in this case, since that's how I tend to explain. So if you've asked your partner to stop doing what they're doing, and they are totally wanting to understand, oh, what did I do? I didn't know I was doing it. And they genuinely want to know what did they do wrong and they want to make changes, then you can work on it. And that's unlikely, that's less likely to be toxic. So it's also got to do with what happens when you talk to them about it. You can see toxicity in the way they respond to discussions about the issues.
But then I guess I would ask, or I would assume, which is not the best word to use, but that part of a toxic relationship would be me expressing to my partner that what he said makes me feel uncomfortable, or makes me feel, icky in my skin, or hurts my feelings, makes me sad. And he's like, I didn't say anything like that to you. Or, oh, I'm really sorry, that wasn't my intent. And from the gaslighting perspective, that's where the confusion comes in. Well, if I've brought it up to you and it's not your intent, yet you continue to do it, how is it not your intent?
That's where the continue to do it is the or changes after you've brought it up makes the difference. That's the nuance as well. Oh, I didn't intend to do that. Well, that can be said in a toxic or not toxic relationship. I didn't intend to do that. It could be genuine, and it could be gaslighting. So you can't really just look at that.
Okay, I understand. All right. No, that's,
you know what I'm saying?
It's hard though, because I guess by the time somebody's coming to see you, because it's insidious and because it's slow, and because I heard, I think it was actually Jordan Peterson talk about how abuse happens is that somebody pushes until you push back, and then they stop for a bit, and then they push a little more, so it's slowly ebbing forward until you end up pushed a lot further than you ever would. And because that's happened over such a long time, and the effects of it are so slow, you become a different person, whether it's dysfunctional or whether it's toxic. I'm coming to you and I'm such a shell of my original self from a self-confidence perspective. And that could be because I've come to you with all of my history from all of my life, because I was never able to trust myself from when I was little. And there's all of the things coming that it would be incredibly difficult for me to say to somebody, especially to my partner, what you just said is not okay.
Yeah,
so
you're absolutely right.
How do you begin? Does the therapy start with making one feel okay in one's skin, or does the therapy start with pushing the boundaries and making one feel okay in one's skin simultaneously?
It doesn't have, it's a good question. And it's both have to happen, because you have to do what is working to make the person feel safe.
Right.
So like you say, if a person comes to me, you're right. It can be hard to not just say that doesn't feel okay to me, can you stop doing it? That can be hard to say, but to even recognize that there's a need to say it can be difficult. Or to recognize that what's happening is not okay. So oftentimes, and that's why that's what my coaching entails, because therapy is going to look at, so you bring up a very good point, because therapy is going to look at the person in front of me and building them up. That's going to be the starting point. Therapy looks back. But with my coaching, it's more about looking at what is the future that you want, what needs to be done now, and it addresses both. It addresses building up the person to, and I always say, to get themselves back again, because I do believe that she was there always at one point. We are born healthy and whole.
Complete and perfect.
So, yeah. So in my coaching, it's about helping the woman rebuild her self-worth, rebuild her self-confidence, understand boundaries. And then with the boundaries and the communication scripts that I teach and that kind of thing, then she's better equipped to be able to even express herself to a partner.
And understood. And I was thinking, you and I started having a conversation once, and then we decided we were going to leave it for our podcast about the difference between therapy and coaching.
Oh, yeah, there you
I
go.
don't know if you remember, you remember us talking about that a little bit. And I had said something that you can have therapy, and this isn't knocking therapy in any way whatsoever, because therapy has its place, but you can have therapy till you're blue in the face. It very rarely instills actionable items, like actionable steps to move forward. It allows a great understanding and insight and all of these things, but it's like, okay, so, I have mommy issues and daddy issues and kitty issues and all of the things that happen to me, and now what? And that's where coaching comes in to say, okay, now you understand this. As an adult, we have choice. We all do. We might not like it, but we all do. How do we use that choice and move forward, which is often incredibly, incredibly difficult and incredibly, incredibly uncomfortable. But I'm jumping forward way too much. So when you say somebody comes to you, like if you're looking at the person or you're listening to the person, are there any symptoms that are incredibly obvious to you as a therapist that happen time and time and time again? Not to say that I would necessarily recognize them in myself, just out of interest. Any symptoms that you see that are like, okay, I get that this person is in a toxic relationship. Now I need to work on my strategies and with all my knowledge on how to help them.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm asking if I were to come to you and I said, I'm like, I say this, or I look like this, or I'm experiencing this. Are there any that are just clearly obvious to you to say, okay, the relationship is chances are really high that the relationship that you're in is not serving you and you need to get out of it, and we need to work on ways.
If you're going to say it as extreme as that, not good, and you need to get out, then that would be like clear abuse. But otherwise, toxic, I think you might be speaking to like things that you see that makes it appear toxic is repeated patterns and cycles that are not changing.
Okay, I'm going to change my question because I'll put it in my in my sphere, right?
Yeah.
When people come to me and physically there's things about them that I can see. It's not that you're over or underweight. It's not that you have a chronic illness or a chronic disease. It's not that you're over medicated. It's not even the foods that you're eating. It's things like how somebody's sleeping. I look at the pallor of their skin or of their eyes, or what it looks like underneath their eyes. The quality of your hair or your skin or your nails. And I can say, okay, there's definitely some issues here that go beyond simply the food that you're putting in your body. And then we can look at things like digestion or those. But there's always, there's a very big difference between somebody coming to me for fat loss, which a lot of people do, or somebody coming to me, often is for fat loss anyway, but I can tell that there's other issues.
You know what the thing is that the symptoms overlap with so many other things that I'm not going to say you're in a toxic relationship because I'm seeing one little, like not sleeping. Of course, a person in a toxic relationship is probably having difficulty sleeping and having very high anxiety. Yes. The thing is, that's why I also said earlier, it's less important to answer the question, is it toxic or is it dysfunctional? Either way, you have to do something about it. It's not serving. Exactly. Either way, it's not serving you. Either way, you need to learn to communicate. Either way, you need to learn to have better boundaries. Either way, you need to, when I say need to, I mean it is in your best interest. Everybody can do whatever they want to do and how they want to live their life. And they are toxic or dysfunctional, because nobody's going to come to me if they're happy. So I'm going to call it toxic or dysfunctional. Either way, boundaries is going to be important. Learning to communicate what's going on, express it, and then observe the changes that are or are not happening. But not sleeping, anxiety are typical symptoms. But remember, that can be for so many things. That's why I don't want to say this is the sign of toxic.
Sure, got it. But there's nothing like, there isn't one or two that you like, because does everybody have sleep issues, or are some people able to manage their sleep within a toxic relationship? Not to say that if you have sleep issues, you're in a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
I'm saying, are there a few symptoms?
Many people, their sleep is affected, and anxiety is through the roof, and rumination and constant thinking about the relationship, constantly over analyzing the relationship. This is the confusion that I talk about. So I like to just look at it as it's confusion, because the brain is trying so hard to figure out what is going on here. And it's resulting in this anxiety and rumination, constantly thinking about, constantly overthinking. And that leads to such high anxiety.
So then, because we're humans and it's what we do, we look for coping mechanisms. Mm-hmm. So what type of coping mechanisms do you see?
Yeah. Sometimes people turn to alcohol. Sometimes people start getting into other relationships that are not healthy for them. So
it's like having an affair, or just even friendships?
I was thinking more affairs or one-night stands.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So behavior that's even less self-serving.
Yeah. See, because that's another way to look at what's going on in your life. Is what you're doing working for you, and does it feel good? Does it feel healthy? That's enough. Just again, I'm not going to say a sign of toxic, but a sign that something in your life is not working well. Right. Something is in your best interest to change.
Well, because in my world, we're looking we look for, what humans do is we look to get out of discomfort by specifically, more often than not, engaging a brain hormone called dopamine. So dopamine is our reward, it gives us a reward response. It's one of those things when you get a like on Facebook that gives you just that dopamine rush for half a second. And one of the problems with dopamine is, number one, we love it. Number two, we seek it. Number three, it takes away, or this is not one of the problems, it's many issues. We seek it. The more we have, the more we want. It's very addictive. And we also become desensitized to it really fast. So the more you get, the more you need to even try and elicit the same response. That first big hit of dopamine is very, very difficult to repeat, yet we continuously try to repeat it.
That sounds exactly like drug addiction.
Yes, it is. It is. They often say that, specifically talking about crack cocaine, is you're always chasing that first high, and that's the dopamine. But simply because it's a behavior or a socially acceptable thing that we consume, or something that we do to our bodies, it can still elicit the dopamine response. And we use it as a coping mechanism, because when dopamine is in play, discomfort is gone. So when we're in a situation, be it physically or emotionally, we often resort to behaviors that stimulate dopamine. Now, everybody has their own poison, and we all do it in certain ways. Alcohol can do it. One-night stands can do it. It's like a rush, right? Yep. Think of it as the rush. Gaming often does it. for people. Exercise can do it. Food can do it, specifically foods that
social media.
Yeah, shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All of those things. So, I would think that often people maybe, I don't know, I would hope that they come because they realize something's wrong, but maybe the awareness of the dysfunction in the relationship has been moderated to such a degree because we're going through so many dopamine stimulating behaviors, and that's a really tough cycle to break. We often talk about emotional eating, and I bet you see a lot of that, like emotional eating and alcohol abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
as symptoms, because they're the most socially acceptable ways to deal.
They are, it's funny when you say I probably see a lot of that. People don't often come out and say that that's what's happening. It's happening, but it's not as much reported.
So, okay. So how would you, I mean, nobody's going to come and say, I binge eat every night.
No, but they might say, and I've been overeating and I've been gaining weight. I've been gaining weight since this relationship. Yeah. That's one that I often hear. Since this relationship, I've been gaining weight, people say.
But sometimes that happens in a good relationship too, because eating is such a bonding experience.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I'm saying about these symptoms. We can't say that it is a sign of a toxic relationship. We can maybe say signs that we're not at our optimal health, perhaps, or something like that. Or it's a way of looking at, what do I want to change in my life?
Right. Got it. And then I'm going to go back to something else that you said earlier that I was thinking about, because you said as a therapist, you're working on the person, mm-hmm. and making them, like the woman, just because that's our analogy here, reclaiming herself, mm-hmm. finding herself again. So do you find that if that happens, that the self-trust or the self-confidence allows one, without as much coaching, to look around their lives? And as I said a little earlier, the way we are in one area of our life is the way we are in every area of our life. So I would think that if we're in a toxic, like romantic relationship, or let's say a not self-serving romantic relationship, that many of the other relationships in our life are similar to that. And does learning to trust yourself very naturally or organically begin to shift how we look at those relationships and how we change them? Or are the behaviors so set in the brain? Because we know those neural pathways get set really, really young, and it's hard to make a new path to the same result. That's from a behavior change perspective. Does it take more work than simply, and I'm not saying simply, it takes a lot of work to learn to trust yourself again, but does it take different work, or is learning to trust yourself or reclaiming yourself in that way, is that enough? Or does it depend on the person?
Okay, Nicole, that was a very long explanation with a lot of different things. So do tell me if I'm answering what you're thinking about. So one of the things I was thinking is that I have seen both ways, where what's happening in what you're doing in one area of your life is happening in the other areas. And I have seen people in toxic relationships with other relationships around them that are also not working well, not to have friendships that are not serving them best, perhaps family relationships that are in conflict. I have also seen it not happen that way. Okay. I've also seen, and perhaps the determining variable is history. I think people who have a history of dysfunctional relationships might find that they have family dysfunction, friendship dysfunction, and are in repeated toxic relationships. Then I've also met people who have some stability in other relationships and have gotten into a toxic relationship further down the line, but they do still have stability in some of their friendships and some of their family relationships. So that's one piece. Tell me what you were saying about the self-trust.
Well, so when you're in, so I was using a very like personal experience to ask that question, and I'll maybe if I explain it to you that way, I can tell you what happened to me. Now, you also know me well, and you know the type of person that I am, and it could be because of the type of person that I am, or simply situationally how my life evolved. But I grew up with very little self-trust, and many of my relationships, not all, I had some absolutely fabulous, wonderful relationships as I was growing up as a child that taught me some amazing things. But many of my relationships really eroded trust in myself. And I think I mentioned it in our first podcast, I was in therapy most of my life, right? I had good therapists, bad therapists. I learned how to manipulate therapists. We were joking about, I got my therapist to tell my parents to give me the latest curfew out of all my friends. Like, I've done it all. And eventually, and this was when in my early 30s, I had a big life trauma, and it absolutely changed me. It changed every single part of my being and the outlook on my life. And it wasn't like all of a sudden like this, but it was relatively quickly, from 30 years of over 30 years of this to a year or two, me looking around my life and noticing how few of my relationships actually served me, and having the trust in myself to manage those relationships better. In some cases, it was move beyond the relationship. In some cases, it was change my expectation of the relationship or change the boundaries of the relationship, which didn't sit well with some people, because we choose people in our relationships for reasons, right? We often choose somebody because they give us something. It might not be a good thing, but it's something that we're used to or accustomed to, or something that we're getting from it. And so for me, it was this newfound trust in myself that created the ability to really change things. Now, through that journey, there was a lot of personal development that went on. I did a lot of courses, but it wasn't so much that I had formal training in what to do to move forward. It was just my interest in how do things evolve and develop. And it's pretty much how I started to do what I do now. So my question is, how often does something like that happen? And I'm not to say that I'm special or wonderful, but I'm a certain kind of individual, and I know that I have a lot of self-insight into myself, and not everybody does, and not everybody wants to. So how often is that? And it's still not perfect, right? I always say life is a practice, not a perfect. And so how often is that something, or is that something that happens often, or are more people, especially in the world that we're in, where we've been so programmed to outsource so much of our mental health, physical health, all of that to other people? Do people tend to need the more structured, this is the communications, this is the communication script. Yeah, do you understand what I'm saying?
Like a formal way of figuring things out in life.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a big question. I love this question. It's, you know what? I have seen people not have therapy, but go through something huge in their lives, and it still causes something to happen. Even if it's a period of isolation that circumstances cause, and a period of like intense self-reflection that people can make changes. I will say though, the most, how do I call it? If I can define the most positive and healthiest way of living, to be defined something along the lines, obviously it's not a definite the definition, but I would say someone who can live their lives calmly, expressing themselves clearly, being regulated so that emotions are not roller coasters. Sure, of course, we have range of emotions because we're humans, and we can get angry, but when anger doesn't look huge, and when anxiety doesn't cause so much sleepless nights that you can't even think straight the next morning, but when things are manageable. Wow, I'm so getting myself off tangent here. For someone to reach that, I feel like they need something formal, whatever that formal is. So this brings me to one of my soapboxes. I often say we have lost the village, because I think that in days gone by, when there was a village, when there was community, people could naturally, let's call it, heal, or find a way to build their self-trust again, as you're putting it. They do that naturally through their interactions with the various people in the community that have different roles in their lives. In today's time, I think we have become more and more isolated. The more technology, which is wonderful, technology is allowing you and I to be speaking to each other from miles away. Despite that, technology has led to such increase in isolation that I don't think people can find it on their own like that. People need people. That's my bottom line. People need people. We were not designed to live in isolation.
I would agree 100%. Community, when it comes, again, in my work, when it comes to lifestyle change, when it comes to chronic illness management, specifically through diet and lifestyle change, one of the key factors for success is community. If you look at people who join a gym, and do a weight loss challenge with a whole bunch of people, they're often much more successful than if they do it on their own. And the minute they stop and that community is gone, there's often a reversal.
A relapse.
Yeah. So I wonder though, and this just so do you think there's been an increase over the last, let's say over our lifetimes, because that's when community has dwindled and isolation has definitely exploded? I mean, the last 5 years more than anything, but over our lifetimes, we've seen, that first Apple computer that came out, the little bubble, to everything, like your entire life being here. So we've seen that change as generation.
But that be talking in what, like the last 35 years, something
35,
like that.
40 years. But do you think that there has been a rise in dysfunctional and toxic relationships as not to say that it caused it, because there's always been, but the community has always also been there to support and cushion and help. So with all of that, has there been this rise in these toxic relationships, almost in a similar way that there's been a rise in toxicity in the body with chronic illness?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't like speaking out of turn if I haven't done the research. So, and I don't know the answer to that as a fact. I could see
in your experience.
Yeah, I will say, I can say in my experience, I have seen more of it. That's for sure. Whether it's because there is a rise in it, or whether there is a greater insight into people because of the internet and what we're made aware of, people realizing what is going on and able to speak about it, and so much even toxicity is becoming less stigmatized. So people are talking about it more. Then the more you talk about it, the more you find other people who have experienced the same thing. So it could be that it's just that people are more aware and that it's out more. It could it be because there's actually more toxic relationships because there's no more the community we used to have? I think that's possible too.
We've lost the art of communicating with each other,
and like supporting each other, being cooperative and collaborative.
Right. Everything's a competition. Everybody's better or worse, right? But also, when your entire life is texting somebody, it's very different from having a conversation.
Very different.
And so when it comes to having conversations, and we're also in this very much an instant gratification world, and we're not taught. And I think this is a lot in school now, where everybody gets a medal type thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're not taught what it's like to succeed and to fail, and we need both.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We need both. So I would think, and this is just my thoughts, it's not science, I would think that what you said, it's a little bit of both and, right? Yes, there's more awareness, but there's this, we've lost the art of communicating with each other. We've lost the art of moderating our emotions, because you can say whatever you want to somebody online with very little consequence. I wouldn't be able to say some of it I wouldn't say it to your face, but to somebody's face. But we've lost the art. When we're in a relationship with somebody and we're not getting what we think we want or what we feel we're entitled to or deserve, we often don't have the words or the way to express that. So it can come out quite badly and quite negatively. As I said a little earlier, we've learned to outsource responsibility for almost everything in our lives to somebody else. So if I'm not feeling good, that's your fault. Right? So I think it's all of it together. So I don't know. It's such a big topic, and I've enjoyed this conversation today. I learned a lot. I always learn so much from you. So I learned a lot, and I know we haven't even scratched the scratch on the top of the surface.
Well, I want to say I was also wondering what your perspective was about from your perspective with what you do in wellness and nutrition. In terms of toxic. You mentioned it a little bit today, but I wonder what else your thoughts. I imagine you might be thinking some things as well regarding toxicity to the body.
It's interesting, because I often find that people, again, this learning to trust yourself or serving yourself or understanding what really is serving yourself, we've lost that. Right? We've been taught, to put things in our bodies that give us that dopamine hit, or that might make us feel good for a moment, or we're told that they make us feel good, and they're actually quite detrimental for us. Like, even when you're little, right? You're feeling bad, here, have some ice cream. You did well in school, have some ice cream.
Right.
Is ice cream the best way to deal with a sad emotion or a happy emotion? And then you lose the ability to say, I am sad. The only thing you know is, I need ice cream. And it's the Pavlov's dog situation.
Isn't that interesting how
so I see. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I speak over you so much. I'm so sorry to everybody. I'm terrible. I need to work. I do try work on that, and then I get so excited. So I apologize. Anyway, back to my thoughts. So the reason that I'm so interested in what you have to say is that so often I see people who treat themselves poorly from what they choose to put into their body, and it's a choice. Nobody's forcing you to fall on the box of cookies. It can happen, and it's not to say that that it should never happen, but every night when you're diabetic,
what is it giving a person? What is that emotional eating giving to the person?
Hang on. Dopamine. So I'm just going to. So what I often find is people who do that, and it doesn't have to even be emotional eating as we would think about it. It's simply not serving your needs, not serving the health of this miracle of a vessel that we've been given ourselves. And I so often find that people who struggle the most with that, and women who struggle the most with with body image and fat loss tend to have, I've always called it dysfunctional relationships in their lives. And it's not an always and never, but it's a lot. So a lot of the coaching that I end up doing is around goal setting and, learning to feel physically good in your skin, which often translates to feeling mentally good in your body. Because at the end of the day, if you're not fueling your brain isn't working properly. And if your brain isn't working properly, you're not fueling your brain and your body appropriately. So it becomes this vicious cycle. So for somebody who comes to you, right, I'm willing to bet that the majority of the time, their nutrition is off, whether they eat too much or too little or too often, or they binge restrict,
or not the healthiest of foods,
or they choose foods that give them that dopamine rush, to try and self-medicate, right? We use food to self-medicate. That cookie that you eat for all of maybe 2 seconds makes you feel good, and then you want it again, and then you want it again and again and again, which is why if you open up a bag of chips, all of a sudden the whole bag is gone, or a slab of chocolate, all of a sudden, and how did I do that? But, there's many, and we can talk about this in another podcast, because there's many downstream effects with many of the hormones in your body and in your brain that are triggered and not triggered by these foods, and they're hyperpalatable, which means they overexcite the taste buds. It's a lot of, it's emotional moderation. Like literally, because you're not feeling, even for that minuscule of a second, you don't feel overly happy or overly sad, right? Or overly
regulate your emotions, which is what I was saying earlier, in terms of what do I consider to be living a healthy person, is being regulated, and there you're speaking to it again.
Yes, so that's my point. And when you were talking about it, one of the things that I really work on doing is doing that with blood sugar, because what happens to us is we're on this blood sugar roller coaster all day, or we raise our blood sugar up and we keep it high, both of which are not homeostatic. They're not creating this equilibrium, this balance for the body.
What causes blood sugar to do that?
Eating foods that turn to a lot of sugar really fast. So there's a lot of nuance there, and there's a lot of things that can do it, and it's not simply food, but food and stress are two that do it a lot. And eating foods that turn to sugar, and I'm using the words very carefully here, because we often think of it as just food that is sweet.
Right. So you're talking, for instance, like fruit.
I'm talking, for instance, for our basic conversation, there's a lot of nuance, right? Let's talk about things like candies and cookies and pastries and chips and breads and buns and all of those kinds of things. Those are things ice cream, those are things we tend to overeat. And eating large amounts of them in one sitting, or eating them continuously throughout the day, will raise the blood sugar, and then the blood sugar will go down, as opposed to a ripple, which whole foods tend to do better. Again, very nuanced. Please don't send me messages that this isn't all true. As I said, it's just very, very nuanced. But if you think about, we need to be able to, once in a while, experience the extremes of emotion. The body needs to have the ability to perhaps experience an extreme of blood sugar. But is it healthy, and is it smart to experience that multiple times a day, all day, every day? No. Emotions. And this is very stressful to the body. It's unbelievably stressful to the body, and unbelievably stressful to the brain. So it becomes this hamster wheel of a spiral that we're stressing out the brain with our food, so that you can't appropriately think and deal with a situation.
What you're describing, like, we can apply it exactly. Food to the body, and emotions and relationships to the mind, and to relationship. It's the exact same thing.
And not only is it exactly the same thing, they impact each other.
Because both, in both directions.
When the emotions are doing this, right, and stress is doing this, we'll look to self-medicate. Humans just do that. We naturally do that, right? We look to self-medicate. We do it with food. We do it with dopamine is one of the easiest.
We're looking to feel better. Yes. That's what it is. That's what we're always wanting.
We're always looking to escape discomfort, right? And so we eat the food, and that screws up the blood sugar, which then screws up the brain and the thought processes and the emotions, and which in turn doesn't allow us to appropriately deal with whatever's going on in our dysfunctional relationship, which makes us even more stressed, which means we go back to the eating, and it becomes this bigger role of not balance, not balance. I'm not even going to say imbalance. I'm going to say not balance, and everything's feeding everything else. Now, in my experience, if we can, and this is personal experience and client experience, if we can get that blood sugar under control, and we can get the appropriate nutrition to your brain, then everything that you do with every single one of your patients and your clients becomes more doable for the patient and the client. Why? Because they have a working brain.
Yeah.
And so,
I agree with you 100%.
So for me, it's always nutrition for me, and it's what I do. So I'm very biased.
First, to have everything else functioning well, and sleep. I know this isn't necessarily what you're talking about, but I feel like I want to say sleep in there as well, because sleep is so super important.
Absolutely. So one of the things with dysregulated blood sugar and not eating appropriately, what does that affect? Your sleep. Why? Because when we sleep, we repair and restore. And if your body is stressed, you are not sleeping, because it's not about to repair and restore when it's trying to put fires out everywhere, mental, physical, emotional. And if you don't have the nutrients to repair and restore, you're also not sleeping properly, because your body's constantly searching for what it needs to service itself. And it doesn't have it. So you'll either not have restorative sleep or wake up multiple times in the night. Not to say that food will cure all sleep issues. It will not. There's many, many factors that impact sleep.
But it definitely improves things. Definitely improves your functioning, your ability to think, your ability to focus, your ability to use discernment in a relationship to determine if this feels like a healthy relationship. Again, I think it's less important to say, is this let's determine, is it toxic or is it just not a good relationship? That's less important than, how do I feel in this relationship? And how can you even determine that if you aren't first sleeping well, feeling good? Because it's just, everything impacts everything, which I'm just reiterating what you're saying, how the mental, the physical, the food, the sleep all impacts, and in both directions.
Everything. And which is why when we decided to do this, I was so excited and wanted to collaborate with you. It's psychiatry, not psychology. Psychiatry has been a very strange science and medical discipline. And only recently, and I'm talking very recently, in the last probably decade, have scientists started looking at the impact of food on the functioning of the brain, right? Like, weird that they've never thought of it before. And nutritional psychiatry now is a huge developing science, huge. And the things that they are finding out about the function of the brain with diet. And this isn't new stuff. They've known that food impacts the brain since the early 1900s, where I'll just tell the story because it's super interesting, where they developed what people now think of as a weight loss diet, the ketogenic diet, in a very specific way, and it's been adulterated and it's not what it was then, but it was a diet that was developed to help especially young children who had drug-resistant epilepsy. And they found that putting them on this diet reduced their seizures so significantly that these children grew up and had functional lives. So that's, I know you might not think that it applies to what we're talking about, but it shows the impact that food can have on how the brain functions. So, when somebody comes to you and they're trying to deal with something, mentally deal with something, and their brain is dysfunctional, they're not going to be able to deal with it close to as effectively as if they have a functional brain. And so getting your brain working well with all of the factors that we discussed is such a big piece of the puzzle. Such a big piece. And as I can say, I know personally it's one of the things that happened to me. And one of the biggest parts of my healing was nutritionally supporting my brain. And it makes, and it's not that we've always deprived our brains, but it doesn't help. And the way that nutrition is taught to us and what we're told about nutrition and all the myths out there all impact us. So even if somebody came to you following what some people might believe is a relatively healthy diet, it might not be the best diet for their brain function, and they can still optimize that, which is a wonderful thing. So again, your toxic relationship with your food and your toxic relationship with your partner are directly correlated in some way.
Yeah, and directly impact each other.
Yeah. So that's part of, again, my theory of the way you are in one area is the way you are in and I won't say every area, but many areas.
I think that, sorry to be so specific and semantic.
Good.
I do think in general that is, my dog is busy crying.
Oh, I know, I want to see him.
I'm trying to get him on camera. Yeah, there we go, instead of him moaning.
Oh, hello, Dad. So pretty, so handsome. I love dogs. Dogs.
Yeah, you have a few of your own.
I have two. They're sleeping.
It's his eating time is what's going on.
Okay.
I do think that's in general a fairly accurate statement, that how we are in one area is how we are in other areas. I think it's just not always 100%.
It's not absolute. It's not. It's not absolute. I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Whew. That was a lot. How's your brain doing?
Please look at his ears. So his ears are, this is how he is. One is always in a different direction than the other. It's just how his ears are.
I love it. It's so cute. He's so handsome.
He's so
my God, such a beautiful color. All right, my friend. That was a lot to absorb.
It was a lot.
Emotionally.
Yeah, mentally and emotionally. I hope that this has been helpful and interesting for those listening.
Well, it was interesting to me. So I'm happy with that. So remind people again where they can find you.
Oh, thank you. So I'm on Facebook, Jodi Greenblatt Coaching, and the name of my program and the name of my community in Facebook is Empower Her Transformation, Breaking Free from Toxic Relationships.
Love it. And people can find me on Facebook or on my website. My website is michaloffer.com, MICHALOFER.com. Michal Offer Lifestyle and Wellness on Facebook. I post articles every day on food and my philosophy around food and lifestyle stuff. So come and have a read if you've got some time, and make some comments and get to know both of us outside of here too. Also, feel free to comment on anything that you've heard today in the comment section below. We always love to hear from everybody. So that really helps us build our community, which we discussed today is so important.
And I love reading the comments and seeing the comments, so I know what you all want.
Right. And that's it. If you want to listen, if you want us to talk about something, let us know. This is Real Talk. We're up for anything, and we'll give our opinions. And as I'm sure you've noticed, they're not always the same. And I think we can have a conversation without emotional dysregulation.
There you go.
All right, Jodi, have a wonderful night. Dash, enjoy your dinner, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Nice to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dash says bye.